Brandon looked up. His face shifted through surprise and guilt like he didn't know which emotion to land on first. Elena offered a quick smile, but her eyes were concerned. Chloe stared openly, fork paused in midair. Henry leaned into his chair, wide-eyed, and across the table, Margot sat perfectly still, her gaze fixed on her plate as if I were a sound she could ignore until it went away. Dad pulled out the chair they'd set for me. My place setting was there, my childhood plate, with the small chip on the rim. That detail made my throat tighten. It meant someone had remembered. But the plate was cold. The food had already started without me. I sat anyway. Dinner resumed like a record needle returning to a track, but it wasn't smooth. It skipped. "How was the drive?" Elena asked carefully. "Snowy," I said. Brandon cleared his throat. "Portland still raining all the time?" "It's Oregon," I replied. "We don't melt. We just adapt." Grandma Marian gave a small approving hum, like she liked that answer. My mother poured herself more water. "You look tired," she said, which for her was practically a hug. Then Margot spoke without looking at me. "So," she said, voice sugar sweet, "you still doing that internet job?" I met her gaze. She finally looked up. "It's not an internet job," I said evenly. "I run the learning team at a publishing company." Margot's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Must be nice to work from anywhere." The implication hung there, anywhere except where you belong. I took a slow sip of water. "It's nice to have built something." Silence. My dad coughed and changed the subject too fast. "Naen brought gifts," he said, forcing cheer. "We should do those after dinner." Chloe leaned toward me, curiosity overtaking caution. "Mom says you don't like Vermont." Margot's eyes flicked to her daughter. "Chloe, it's okay," I said softly to Chloe. "I like Vermont. I just moved away." "Why?" Henry asked bluntly. "Because little boys don't do subtle." I hesitated. "Because sometimes you have to go where you can grow." Margot let out a small laugh that wasn't humor. "Some of us don't get to just leave," she said finally. There it was. Not an insult exactly. Something worse, a resentment dressed up like a fact. My mother stood abruptly. "Dessert," she announced, before the kids turned feral. She brought out a tray of cookies and a pie, not pecan, apple, with a thick, buttery crust. Grandma Marian brightened. "Naen used to steal the cinnamon sugar off the top before it cooled." "I still would," I admitted, grateful for the softness. Margot reached for the pie server first. "Chloe gets the first slice," she said immediately. "She's the oldest now." The oldest now. Like that was the real reason. Dad's hand hovered like he wanted to intervene, but he didn't. Not yet. Old habits. I forced a smile and slid my plate toward Chloe. "First slice is an honor," I said. "Enjoy it." Chloe grinned, innocent. Margot's expression said, "And know your place." Then, as everyone settled back into forced normal, Margot stood and lifted her glass. "I didn't want to make a big deal," she said, voice bright enough to cut through tension. "But since we're all together, Dylan and I are having another baby." Cheers erupted. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, eyes shining. Brandon clapped. Elena beamed. The kids squealed. Dad smiled real. Proud. I smiled too. I did. Because a baby is a baby and I wasn't going to punish a child for the emotions of the adults around them. But I noticed something. Margot never looked at me during the announcement. Not once. She performed happiness for everyone else like I wasn't in the room. Then she added, lightly, "It's just so special to raise our family here, surrounded by real support." Her eyes finally met mine. The message was clear enough to read from across the table. "This is what staying looks like. This is what being chosen looks like. You're just visiting." My hands went still in my lap, and in that moment, I realized something with a strange calm. I could stay quiet, smile politely, and leave later with my dignity in shreds. Or I could tell the truth and let the pieces fall where they fell. My dad started passing gifts from under the tree, like he wanted to patch over the moment with wrapping paper and tape. I handed out what I brought. Chloe opened the music box kit and gasped, "It's like I can build my own song." Henry shook the story stones like maracas. "These are cool." Dad opened the clamp and actually laughed, a full sound that cracked something open in the room. "Where did you find this?" he asked, turning it over like it was treasure. "I've remembered," I said. Mom opened the Nativity angel and went quiet. Her eyes watered before she could stop it. She cleared her throat sharply. Well, she said, that's practical. Thank you. That was her version of emotional. Elena thanked me warmly. Brandon nodded, and I saw guilt in his face again, like he was remembering all the times he chose silence because it was easier. Then Margot opened her scarf. She held it up like it might be contaminated. It's pretty, she said. Then, I don't really wear green anymore. She set it aside with a careful smile. My turn came. From Brandon and Elena, a generic gift basket with cocoa packets and a mug that said "Home for the Holidays." From my mother, a set of dish towels with snowmen on them. From Margot, a framed photo. I opened it. It was a family picture taken last year in front of the same tree. Dad, Mom, Brandon and Elena, Chloe and Henry, and Margot and Dylan. Everyone smiling, everyone present. No space where I would have been. Margot tilted her head like she'd given me something meaningful. So you don't forget what you're part of, she said. My throat tightened. I nodded slowly. Thank you. Then, because fate has timing and mine has always been cruel, my elbow bumped my water glass. It tipped. Water spilled across the table, sliding toward the edge, splashing onto the rug. I grabbed napkins immediately. I'm so sorry. Margot didn't even look at the water. She looked at me, expression flat, and said softly, "You always do this. You show up and everything gets complicated." The room froze. My father set down the paper towels he'd grabbed. His hands were shaking with anger he'd been swallowing for too long. Brandon stared at his plate. My mother's face went tight with discomfort, the kind she usually turned into denial. Chloe went silent. Grandma Marion's grip tightened on her cane. I stood up very carefully, napkin still in my hand, water dripping off the table edge. My voice came out steady. "Congratulations on the baby," I said to Margot. "Truly?" Margot blinked, surprised I wasn't crying. I continued, still calm. "And since we're sharing announcements, I have one too." Dad's eyes widened slightly, like he was afraid of what I might say, and proud that I was finally saying something at all. "I came here because Dad asked me to," I said, "and because a part of me wanted to believe there was still a place for me at this table." I looked at my mother. I've tried to stay connected. I've sent gifts. I've called. I've swallowed a lot of silence. I looked at Brandon, and I've watched people I love let Margot speak for all of you because it's easier than dealing with her anger. Then I looked directly at Margot. "But what happened at the door tonight?" I said. "That wasn't protecting Christmas. That was you deciding I don't belong." Margot's jaw tightened. My mother's voice was low and warning. "Naen," I raised my hand slightly, not aggressive, just a boundary. "No, let me finish." My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed even because I refused to become the problem in my own story. "I'm not asking to be celebrated," I said. "I'm not asking to be chased. I'm asking to be treated like I'm human, like I'm family." Silence. The kind of silence where everyone hears their own guilt. "I'm not going to fight for a seat at a table where my presence is considered complicated," I said. "If I'm welcome, say it. If I'm not, say that too. But I'm done accepting half love." I picked up my coat from the chair back and turned toward the hallway. My hands weren't shaking anymore. I made it to the front door, my fingers wrapped around the knob, and then I heard my father behind me. "Naen," he said, voice rough. "Don't go." I paused. Footsteps approached, not rushed this time, but intentional. Dad stepped into my view first, Brandon beside him. Elena behind Brandon, hand on his arm. Grandma Marion stood a few feet back, straight as a ruler. Then my mother's arms still crossed, but her eyes wet. Finally, Margot. No one spoke for a moment. Then my father said, "You're right. And I'm sorry." The words landed heavy because Naen Prescott didn't apologize easily. He was the kind of man who fixed things with tools, not sentences. "I invited you," he continued, "and I should have made sure you walked through that door like you belonged, because you do." Brandon swallowed hard. "I let it happen," he admitted. "I told myself it wasn't my fight. That was cowardly." Elena nodded. "It wasn't fair," she said quietly. My mother exhaled like she'd been holding it in for years. "I didn't know how to handle this," she said, "so I avoided it, and that made it worse." Then Grandma Marian spoke, and her voice was calm but unforgiving in the way only grandmothers can be. "You don't freeze out your own blood and call it tradition," she said. "That's not manners, that's cruelty." Margot's face changed, not soft exactly, more like something inside her finally cracked. She looked at me, really looked, and her voice dropped. "I didn't want you here because I didn't want to feel." She stopped, swallowed. "I didn't want to feel left behind." No one moved. Margot continued, quieter. "You left and built a life. You have freedom. You made choices I was afraid to make." Her eyes glistened with something that wasn't just guilt, it was fear. "And when you come back," she admitted, "it reminds me that I stayed, not because I chose it, but because I didn't know who I'd be without this place." I stared at her, shocked by the honesty. Margot's voice shook now. "So I made you the villain, because it was easier than admitting I was jealous." My mother made a small sound like pain. My father looked down. Margot took a breath. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the door, for the comments, for trying to shrink you so I didn't have to look at my own life." I didn't answer right away, because forgiveness isn't a switch you flip when someone finally says the right words. But I also didn't want to run anymore. I nodded once. "Thank you for saying the truth," I said carefully, "but sorry doesn't erase 3 years." Margot nodded quickly. "I know." I turned to all of them. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to be a family, then we stop pretending. No more polite cruelty. No more letting one person control the room." My dad nodded. "Agreed." Grandma Marian tapped her cane once on the floor. "Not in the dining room," she said. "Go to the kitchen. Sit like real people. Talk like real people." So we did. We sat in the kitchen, the room where the house always felt more honest anyway. The overhead light was too bright. The table was scratched from decades of meals and homework and arguments that didn't get wrapped in holiday bows. And we talked. Not perfectly, not smoothly, but truthfully.